Welcome, believers. Welcome, you wonderfully weird people. Welcome to UFO, aliens, and weird stuff, right? Now, today, I was munging through some stuff and I found this, right? A book called The Unexplained. And in it, right, because this is really old. Well, I mean, we're going back to the 70s here, right? There's a tale called The Men from Mars, the Gary Willcox incident. So I thought I would tell you the story, right? And you can tell me what you think. Now, on the morning of April the 24th, 1964, in the quiet farmland of Newark Valley, New York, a routine day's work would turn into one of the most unusual UFO encounters reported, right? This is the detailed account of farmer Gary Willcox. Now, I've read this, and there's a couple of bits that I find a bit hard to swallow. But look, I will tell you the story, and you can tell me what you think, because you know I am a massive UFO fan. I love a UFO story, right? So it was around 10 a.m. when Gary Willcox was working in a field to the east of his farmhouse. Now, the weather was clear and the ground was dry, right? Perfect, right? He was using a manure spreader and going about his daily routine when something unusual caught his attention. And I'll get this right. At the top of the sloping hill stood an old abandoned refrigerator, partially hidden by the trees. And what he noticed a glint. You know, we've all seen a glint, right? Something shiny. Now, at first, he assumed it was the refrigerator reflecting the sunlight. Okay, and I suppose you would, wouldn't you? But as he continued forward, he realised something didn't make sense, right? The shining object was positioned between him and the refrigerator. Okay, so that does cut out the refrigerator, doesn't it? Couldn't have been that, right? Now, curious, Gary drove to his tractor up the slope, pulling the spreader behind him. Now, he travelled roughly 800 yards to where he had first seen the glint. Okay, what's about 100 yards still to go, he paused. Now, for a moment, he thought he might be looking at a fuel tank, perhaps from the wing of an aeroplane. So he stopped his tractor and continued on foot. Now, the object, okay, now as he approached, Gary realised something extraordinary. The object was not resting on the ground. It appeared to be slightly elevated, hovering basically, right? Now, he could see no undercarriage and no support of any kind. And as he got closer, he estimated its size. Now, he says it was roughly larger than a car, approximately 20 foot long, roughly 4 foot high, and about 15 feet wide. Its shape was smooth, elongated, something like an egg, right? There was no seams, no rivets, and no visible joints, right? So Gary reached out and struck it lightly with his hand. Donk, donk. He even kicked it, apparently, and he said the surface felt unusual. He later described it as being like a metallic canvas. Okay, but things are about to get weirder, right? While examining the object, something unexpected happened. 2 small figures emerged from beneath the craft. They were approximately 4 feet tall. Each carried a tray, roughly 1 foot square. And on those trays were samples of plant life. You know, roots, soil, leaves, bracken, bush, that sort of stuff, right? The 2 figures walked towards Gary and stopped a few yards away from him. So Gary's first reaction, right? At first, Gary didn't feel fear. Instead, apparently, he laughed, right? He believed it might be some kind of a trick, a staged event, perhaps, even with hidden cameras. And I suppose, really, that's the first thing you would assume, I suppose, that someone's ribbing you. But that changed instantly, right, because of the voice. Now, one of the beings apparently spoke, and it said, "Don't be alarmed, because we have spoken to people before." So, Gary said the voice was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He could not understand the words clearly, but could determined that they were trying to speak English, and it seemed as though the sound was coming from around them rather than from either of the beings themselves. Okay, well, it's a bit hard to explain, isn't it? So he's saying that the voice emanated around them and not from them. Now Gary observed them closely. They had arms and legs, but he could see no hands or feet. Now when they raised their arms, he noticed wrinkles where elbows would be, but it's their faces, right, that really freaked him out, because that there were none. There wasn't really a face. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no mouth, and no hair. So look, I'm going on a tangent here, but if you've ever seen the black hole, you know those robots that were working on the computer where Maximilian was hanging around? They had that blank black face. Sounds to me like these could be robots, couldn't they? Right? Now, they wore white metallic looking suits, right? And this strengthens my robot idea, right? But they had no seams, these suits, no stitchings, and no pockets. So robots, what do you think, right? Now, they stood one behind the other, almost as if one were leading the interaction. Now, the conversation, right? Key details. The being told Gary something remarkable, right? They said, we are from what you know as planet Mars. Now, obviously, this is really old, this story. This goes back to the 70s. But since we've had something land on Mars, and if you look at the pictures, you know, there's those weird things and shapes. You've got the ammo box, haven't you? And you've got that thing that looks like an old, I don't know, like an old water bottle. You know, you got like weird creatures and stuff like that. So, you know, even though it sounds like this is crazy, right, because they are from Mars, you don't know, right? Now, they asked him what he was doing. When Gary explained his work, he said, look, I'm spreading manure, and they showed a strong interest, particularly in the fertiliser, right? Both natural fertiliser and artificial fertiliser. Now, Gary offered to get them a bag of fertiliser, and they accepted. I wonder what they wanted with it. All right, please drop answers online, because I can, well, maybe the plant stuff, who knows, right? Now, they also explained that they were travelling this hemisphere, and that they could only come to Earth every 2 years for some reason, right? And at one point, Gary asked if he should leave. You know, look, do you want me to go? Now, the beings told him that he could stick around, but they did have something more serious, a warning, right? And this is not me, this is the book saying it, right? They said that humans should not be sent out into space. Now, Gary even asked if he could go with them, right? But they bluntly refused. They said, no, man, no, you cannot go with us, right? They told him that he could not survive because of the thinness of their atmosphere. So, before the encounter ended, and this is the thing, right, because it's not true, right, the beings made a chilling statement. They mentioned astronaut John Glenn and Virgil Grimson, as well as the 2 Russian cosmonauts. They said these men would die within a year due to exposure in space. And I had a quick look. I looked at John Glenn, just one of them, because I thought it would do, right? And he died in 2016, so that simply isn't true. Now, maybe the aliens were just saying that to scare him because they wanted to, you know, look, sorry, but you can't go with us because you might die. Yeah, humans might die. Or it could be that they just don't want humans in space, because I don't blame them, mate, because we are a terrible species, right? But what do you think? What do you think? Drop me a comment, right? Now, the beings also explained that they were studying Earth's organic materials because of the rocky structure of Mars. And no one can disagree with that, right? Now, they added that they had avoided flying near cities because of the fumes, air pollution, interfered with their craft. There you go. There's another weird thing, isn't it, right? So Gary later stated that the beings made no attempt to harm him. In fact, they carried no visible weapons. Their voices remained constant in tone, and they did most of the talking. Then, with a final warning that he should not mention the encounter, right, the two figures turned, walked back beneath the craft, and disappeared from view. Right, so it's time for them to go. But they also said, don't mention this encounter. He obviously did, didn't he, right? Moments later, the object began to make a sound. Gary described it similar to a car engine idling. Then, it lifted gently off the ground with no blast, all right, no heat, so no real form of propulsion, no sudden noise. It simply rose, because that is really common, isn't it? Right, no noise. It simply rose and moved away towards the north until it vanished, and it was gone. Right. So the aftermath. Right. So Gary returned home. Right, and I think like we would all do. Right, he telephoned his mum. Right, and told her what had happened. Then he simply continued with his day. He milked his cows. He completed other chores. Got to get on with your life, man. Got to get on with your life, right? Later that afternoon, around 4:30 p.m, he returned to the site and left the bag of fertiliser, right, like he promised he would. Right. By the next morning, it was gone. So they obviously had returned for the fertiliser. Weird old story, this one, isn't it? Are you buying it? What do you think? Right, now, news of the incident spread quickly. A neighbour, a Miss Priscilla Baldwin, interviewed Gary and reported the case. Right, the Tioga County Sheriff's Office launched an investigation. Right, so it is serious enough, right, that the sheriff instigated an investigation. Right, and on May the 1st, 1964, Gary gave an official statement. Right. So in 1968, 4 years later, a Dr. Bertrand Eric Schwartz conducted a detailed investigation, and he interviewed Gary as well as his family, friends and neighbours. Now, after extensive psychiatric evaluation, his conclusion was clear, right? Gary Willcox was a normal, truthful individual. He showed no signs of emotional mental illness. And while the interpretation of his experience remained uncertain, the experience itself was very real to him. Right, so he wasn't lying, or he wasn't making it up. Right, now Gary Willcox never reported another encounter. Right, not before and not after that date in April 1964. So the question remains, what did he really see on that quiet hillside? And why, and this is a great question, isn't it? And why would visitors from another world be so interested in something as simple as soil? Well, I can tell you why, right? This is my my stab at it, right? Now, if they do genuinely come from Mars, right, and the inhabitants of Mars have sent some robots down to check our soil out because Mars is irradiated itself. Right, now there is rumours, isn't there, that Mars once was like planet Earth. Alright, and then if you go on another tangent, that we left Mars to come to Earth because there was obviously, I don't know, a nuclear explosion, a solar flare, but something wiped out Mars. So is something still living in the craters underneath? Now that isn't impossible, is it? Right? So look, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of the story? And if you enjoy deep dive cases like this, don't forget to like and subscribe and join me for more UFO, aliens and weird stuff, right? Because this is the channel where I genuinely do like to discuss crazy shit, man. Right, okay, well, look, this is UFO, aliens and weird stuff. Really appreciate you sticking around. What do you think of the Gary Willcox alien Mars thingy story? Right, are you buying it? Do you think that there could be inhabitants in Mars living there still underneath? Not on top, Because like I say, solar flare, atomic, whatever destroyed Mars, maybe the inhabitants went underneath. Alright, and you know, our little investigation is only surface, isn't it? You know, maybe genuinely something could be living under there. Alright, well, look, drop your comments in the line. I would really appreciate that. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.